Ben Malcolm, the Spear Pharmacist here, trying something a little bit new today. I'm going to try a research corner, and the way it works is that I'm going to select an article, a paper that's been recently released in a medical journal and talk with you about it, digest it a little bit more, talk about why it's important and how it changes or updates our understanding of psychedelics and psychedelic therapies. This paper I'd like to share with you today is one that I found incredibly exciting, and it's so exciting I decided to start a research corner around this paper, with this paper being the very first one. So this was an article published in a journal called Psychopharmacology, and it was an article published by Alison Fedducia and colleagues, Lisa Jerome, Michael Mithofer, as well as Julie Holland. And the title of the article is Discontinuation of Medications Classified as Reuptake Inhibitors Affects Treatment Response of MDMA-Assisted Psychotherapy. So to just decode the title a little bit, what they're saying here is that drugs that block reuptake pumps, and specifically they're talking about antidepressants and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. These are probably the most common types of antidepressant reuptake inhibitors that are out there. There's also the medication Wellbutrin or bupropion, which is a dopamine norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor that would also fit the criteria for what they're looking at in this study. And in the MDMA trials that have been conducted so far, the phase 2 trials, all of the trials in their study protocol have required people to taper and discontinue and wash out their antidepressant before being able to participate in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. And the study protocols essentially require a washout period of around 2 weeks. They require 5 half-lives of the drugs plus some extra amount of time for stability. And for most of the antidepressants or reuptake inhibitors, this works out to be around 2 weeks. So in all of the clinical trials, none of the people have been on antidepressants at the time of MDMA administration, but some of the people had to taper and stop their antidepressant ahead of time in order to participate in the trial. The interesting thing to note here is that even the people that did not taper antidepressants to participate in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy did have a history of using and failing antidepressants. It's just that their history of using antidepressants is more remote, and they did not have to taper to participate in the clinical trial. So this 2-week period that they were using in their trial protocol is enough time to be reasonably sure that there is no more of that antidepressant medication left in their system at the time of MDMA administration. However, these antidepressant reuptake inhibitors have neuroadaptive effects on the brain and serotonin neurocircuits that occur over longer periods of time. Therefore, these study authors were interested if this period of time of 2 weeks that was part of the trial protocol was really optimal, or whether they were getting the same results as people that weren't taking antidepressants at the time of study enrollment. And as you can imagine, this is an incredibly important clinical question to answer as MDMA is on the brink of approval, because the first-line therapies for PTSD, which MDMA is being studied for, are these serotonin-blocking antidepressants. So it's an incredibly relevant clinical question to ask. How long does someone need to abstain from an antidepressant to get the safest and most effective MDMA-assisted psychotherapy that they can? So let's dive into the study a little bit more. They took data from 4 of the 6 phase 2 trials, and they picked data from trials that included both outcomes for PTSD as well as MDD, or major depressive disorder. And they just looked at people that got active doses of MDMA. So they took people that got placebos or control conditions out of the equation for this analysis. And what they ended up with was 16 people that were required to taper their antidepressants, and 34 people that had a history of taking antidepressants but weren't taking one at the time of their trial enrollment. Therefore, they did not have to taper off of an antidepressant to be part of the clinical study. And what they found, shockingly, is that people that spent an average, right, the taper group, an average, on a mean average of 25 days off of their antidepressant before their first MDMA treatment, got a second MDMA treatment 3 to 5 weeks later, and then had their PTSD or major depression measured at an endpoint even more distant than that, 1 to 3 months after the second treatment, had appreciably, significantly worse therapeutic outcomes than persons that didn't have to taper their antidepressant. How much worse? It seems that people that had to taper their antidepressants, only 1 in 4 of those people did not meet PTSD diagnostic criteria at the end of the study period, whereas 2 out of 3, essentially 63%, in a group that didn't have to taper antidepressants, no longer met criteria for PTSD. So it seemed that recent use of reuptake pump blocking antidepressants, SSRIs, SNRIs, and they did include Wellbutrin here as well, have a significant effect on MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, even when you've waited enough time for the drug to no longer be present in the system. So the study is incredibly interesting and very valuable, because we now know that 2 weeks, and probably 3 weeks even, is not really enough time to get the most out of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy in persons that are taking antidepressants. The neuroadaptive effects of antidepressants, when they begin working, usually take 4 to 6 weeks for full effect. So, perhaps my personal speculative next best guess would be to wait a period of time, somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks, before attempting MDMA-assisted psychotherapy if you were on antidepressants, had to taper off of them in order to participate. If you're looking for more resources about antidepressants and how they interact with MDMA or other psychedelics, I have a fantastic drug interaction chart that you can access. I have linked in the comments, so please go ahead and download a copy of that chart if you would like. All it requires is to opt in to my email list. I also have a course about antidepressants and psychedelics, and specifically how to taper antidepressants and how to prepare for psychedelic therapies when you're in the process of tapering your antidepressant. Just one more big thank you to Allison Fedducia and colleagues for taking this reanalysis of the phase 2 data on and shedding some light on this incredibly important clinical question. Until next time, until the next Research Corner, take care and be well.